Welcome to the Picky Girl Travels podcast, the show for Black women who want more out of life and to live it as they see fit. The message here is all about defying convention, embracing adventure, and regretting absolutely nothing. I'm your host, Adalia of pickygirltravelstheworld.com. If you've ever listened to this podcast, you've probably heard me say again and again that my mission is to help Black women live life on their terms. But when you're finally able to do that, as with all things, it comes at a cost. So that's what I wanted to talk about on this episode, the cost of living life on your terms, or the cost of living the life that you want. One thing that I firmly believe is that every choice has consequences, good or bad. And all actions have a cost. This is true in everyday life. If you are at the store and you are buying products that are very, very cheap, in order for them to be cheap, somebody had to pay a price. Maybe they are working for lower wages or whatever. So when I say everything has a cost, I mean like literally everything in life. But the reason I wanted to talk to y'all about this is that, people get their feelings hurt when they forget that every choice has a consequence, that everything has a cost associated with it. When they forget that, and they then suddenly are confronted by those consequences. So my idea is, let's talk about what this is like so that you can anticipate, so that you can prepare, and so that you won't get caught off guard. I know there are a lot of people who talk about, whatever the life is that they're living, they talk about how great it is. I don't have to tell y'all that life is not all rainbows and unicorns. So I make a point not to just focus on the good, but to try and show the entire picture. And that's where I'm coming from with this particular episode. The point of this conversation today, I also don't want anybody thinking that I'm complaining, that like this is a bitch session, because that's not what it's about. But I do want to share with y'all, like when you make choices that are best for you, there's going to be folks that are unhappy about that. And I feel like I wouldn't be authentically sharing my experience with y'all if I didn't, talk about the ups and the downs, Okay. So for me, living life on my terms meant living a life centered on travel. Now, over time, over the last 7 years or so, that has shifted to be more about having control over my time and prioritizing ease. Like, I'm not trying to work super hard. Y'all know how I feel about hustle culture, about grind culture. Now, give me a life of ease. That's the life I'm trying to live. But in making choices that support that lifestyle, there's a cost I pay. And so let's get into that. The first price that I pay is kind of a general disapproval of my choices because they are not the norm. That does not matter to me. I really don't give a damn what people think of my choices, because I know that these are the choices that are right for me. But if you have spent much of your life being a people pleaser, and that used to be me, I am reformed now. But if you've spent much of your life being a people pleaser, it is going to kind of come as an unpleasant shock, maybe, that all of a sudden these people who used to have your back, who used to cut for you, now are looking at you with disdain because they don't approve of your choices. And primarily their disapproval comes because those are not choices they would make. It doesn't really matter, but just know, like, if you're running into this, that all of a sudden these people who you thought y'all were tight, you thought, like this was your girl, but all of a sudden now she funny acting, it may be because you're making choices that are so out of the ordinary for the life that they're used to. They don't know how to process that. Again, that's a them problem. That's not your problem. In that same vein, when you live the life that you want, you're making choices for you. And people may throw around the S word. They may call you selfish. And maybe that's because I'm of two thoughts here. Maybe that's because our society is so vested in promoting like that struggle is necessary. So when you choose yourself, you're being selfish. Like, no, you should suck it up and struggle through this thing. So by default, if you're not willing to do that, if you're willing to put yourself first and your happiness first, you're selfish. Okay, so I'm of one thought there. Or maybe this comes from, we just don't have another word for when someone prioritizes their own happiness. Like, think about that for a second. When someone prioritizes their happiness, they prioritize their needs. What is our innate response to that? Do we have a word, a positive word, to categorize that behavior? I'm hard pressed to think of one. Typically, the word we use when someone puts themselves first is selfish, and that it has a negative connotation. What does that say about our larger culture, that when people take care of themselves, because as we all know, you cannot pour from an empty cup. If you don't take care of yourself first, you can't support other people. So if we know that to be true, why is it that the only word we have to describe that behavior is selfish, is a negative thing? It's something you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to look out for yourself. That to me is like really telling and very problematic at the same time. So if you are someone who is very sensitive to how other people view you, this may be a hard thing to accept. This may be a hard thing to handle. I guess for myself personally, because I had endured so much in that first half of my life, I simply just did not give a fuck what people thought about me. Because I was like, when I was suffering, y'all didn't think that much, though, that y'all didn't think many great things about me then. So now that I'm finally living my life for myself, you still want to judge me? I was not here for that. But if you are somebody where other people's opinions matter, this can be a hard thing to navigate. I'm just here to remind you that it's okay. And again, because you make other people uncomfortable doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong or unjustified. Stay the course. As you are choosing and living your new life, your life path is going to diverge. As much as I have always wanted to live the life that I have now, I never would have guessed that this is where I would be now, doing what I am doing now. You know, on Facebook, when it shows you the memories, I looked back at a memory from 9 years ago, 12 years ago, and there is no way in hell you could have told Adalia 12 years ago that she would be living in Mexico City and traveling the world, you know, except for the pandemic. Like, so my path has diverged. So, you know, the Adalia of 12 years ago very much had a very set idea about who her friends would be and what she would be doing and what her day would look like. But when I made the choice in 2014, 2015 to start living the life that I always wanted, making that choice, I don't know that I fully understood it at the time, was really going to cause my life to veer off into uncharted territory. But that also meant that it was going to diverge away from the people I consider to be my friends. I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing, but this is a consequence of the choices that I have made. And so it's a consequence that I have to live with. I'm okay with it because the value I get from and happiness that I feel from living this life, there was no hint of this in my previous life. So, given the choice, there's no way in hell I would choose to continue to live my previous life knowing that this one was possible. You know what I mean? But that also means that you will have friendships that cannot survive that divergence in paths. There are some people that those are your people. This is how you know they are your people, because no matter what your new life looks like, they're still there. And this is not to take a shot at the folks whose time in your life comes to an end because you've chosen this new path. This is not taking a shot at them, because y'all have heard it. People talk about everyone has a certain season in your life. And maybe you couldn't see it before, that this person who you thought would be there forever, that they had a limited season in your life. You couldn't see it, but now that you've made these new choices, you can. That happens. Even if you're not making radical changes to your life, we continue to grow and evolve, and our friendships do as well. Some friendships have met their time and it's time to move on. So, there are people that I am not as close to anymore now that I live this life. There are people who absolutely, they don't fuck with me at all. Like, we don't speak. And I don't think it's a malicious thing. I think it's just our lives are so vastly different. Whatever it was that we had in common, whatever it was that connected us, doesn't exist in the same way. There are people who I consider to be friends where what our friendship looks like has changed. And that's okay. That's all part of, the evolving process of life. I mean, if you think about it, if your life continued to be the exact same year after year, like, who wants that? Where is the fun in that? So I'm not beating myself up too much about it, and you shouldn't either. So, all friendships will not survive, especially if the life that you want to lead involves you moving to a new city, a new state, a new country. All of your friendships will not survive that. And that's okay. You can make new friends. Your remaining friendships can adjust. It's okay. That's really the message of this episode. It is okay. Now, speaking as someone who has left their home country and doesn't really return all that often, physical distance. So physical distance is a concept. What do I want to say about physical distance? Physical distance can create some issues. It means that you can't get back to loved ones as quickly or as often as you want. It also means that you're going to miss events that, had you not made that choice, you would be there. Birthday parties, anniversaries, baby showers, graduations. For some people, That's a non-negotiable. So you either have to choose to live in a place where that's doable. Like right now, I live a 2-hour flight from Houston. I mean, I can get from Mexico to Houston in less time than you can get to Houston from different parts of the United States. But when I lived in Kuwait, when I lived in China, particularly when I lived in China, the physical distance, the different time zones, that can make it very difficult to continue to nurture relationships or even for relationships to function in the same way that they did previously, because, I would be getting up for work and everybody I knew on this side of the world would be like winding down their day, getting ready to go to bed. So if the new life that you want, if living life on your terms involves moving abroad, traveling, like permanent full-time travel, what have you, that does come at a cost. I was not around for the birth of my second granddaughter. She was born right after I moved to China. We'll see if I can be around for my third grandkid's birth. But, this is part of the cost we pay to live the life we want. The next one, I struggled with how to explain this, but again, if the life you want involves moving abroad or traveling full time, your relationship with stuff is going to change, because you cannot, unless somebody is paying for you to move, you cannot take all of that stuff with you. So you're going to have to go through all of the things you own and figure out what's worth taking, what's not, who do I want to have this? Do I sell it? Do I trash it? What? But even when you move to the new place, how you feel about stuff is going to change. When I first moved to Mexico, because I literally, when I am not someplace long-term, everything I own fits into 3 suitcases. And so when I would buy something to furnish my apartment or to be comfortable, there would be this kind of inner struggle of, do I really need that? Is it going to be worth it? The value I get from having this thing. Like for me, it was a microwave. I was like, I don't know when I'm leaving Mexico. The money I'm spending on this microwave, is it going to be worth it? Especially because I can't take it with me. So how you think about things, how you think about the accumulation of things changes. And it can be a little unsettling, because if you think about our culture in the US, the accumulation of stuff, that's like one of the main things we're supposed to be doing. And so that changes. And I'm not just saying this because I am a minimalist. I was a minimalist before I moved abroad. But, you can move somewhere, furnish your place, trick it out, do all this stuff. But somewhere in the back of your mind, you're like, how long am I going to be here? What happens when I leave? For those who are nomads or full-time travelers, I imagine that that's even amplified more. And again, as we're talking about these different costs of living this life, none of this is meant to discourage you. This is all about simply acknowledging that there are consequences to these choices. Here's the other thing. And I know if you listen to this podcast and moving abroad isn't your thing, you're going to be like, but what about all these moving abroad examples? I'm sorry, but my personal journey to the life that I want was very much centered about living outside of the US. And so a lot of the changes and the consequences I've had to deal with are connected to that. That being said, when you live in a new place, and I think this could be true if it's just moving, it's moving within a city, within a state, even moving a job, changing careers. If that's part of living the life that you want, you know, your connection with the community, your connection with other people can be, I don't want to say an issue. It can be tricky. So like, for example, living as a foreigner in other countries outside the US, you are constantly rebuilding community. I don't know that this gets talked about a whole lot because the expat life by its nature is very transient. People get transferred because of jobs. People come into town because they're working as a digital nomad. They're just passing through. They're taking a sabbatical. You know, you may move to this place and like when I moved to Mexico the first time, I did not think I would ever leave. But after a year, I did end up leaving. So that was a disruption. The community that I had built, then I was in a new place and it's like, okay, how do I build community? Like I'll be 100% honest with y'all. I didn't build any community when I was in Kuwait because I knew I wasn't staying there. Same kind of thing in China. My initial contract in China was for 4 months. I ended up being there another year, but I didn't work really hard because I knew that was not the last stop for me. So I guess I want to say that adjusting to that, the transient nature of community and constantly needing to rebuild it, that is something that takes getting used to. Because when I think about my old life, you know, that wasn't something I ever encountered. The people I knew were the people I had always known, you know? Being an outsider, that's another element of this life. I consider Mexico to be home. I am very grateful that Mexico has opened its arms to me. However, even if I master my Spanish, I am never going to be Mexican. So I'm always going to be an outsider. I don't know that it is possible for me ever to fully integrate. That's okay, but it's also a weird thing because the more I try to integrate into life here, or the more I live my life traveling the world, my personal connection to the US and seeing it as my home, that's gone. So I kind of exist in this weird place of not really belonging anywhere. And again, this is not good or bad. It's just the price that I am paying to live this life. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about dating. Choosing to live this life, however it exists today, what it's going to look like in 6 months, what it's going to look like in 2 years, trying to date somebody who is not also living this life is hard because they have to either be open to a long distance relationship or the idea of, oh, I'm dating this woman who doesn't live in the United States. Like, I'm looking for a unicorn. Like, I don't know that this kind of dude actually exists. And so, you know, I guess if dating was a higher priority for me, maybe I would have to suck it up and choose to stay in the US. But to me, the joy I get from living a life centered on travel means way more to me than having a dude to go eat tacos with. I don't know. Maybe that says a lot about me. I don't know. But, you know, it also comes to priorities. Dating is not really a priority, but you know, every blue moon when I feel like, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind going out on a date, that becomes an issue because you can date locals depending where you are, but then there's cultural things and stuff like that. So, let's just chalk this one up as dating gets complicated. Okay. So I've been sharing some of my personal experiences with the cost that I've had to pay in choosing to live the life that I want. But I want you to think about the potential cost that you're going to pay as you start to live life on your terms. Not to scare you, not to warn you off from making those choices. Because remember, that's my whole mission is I want you to live life on your terms. But I just want you to be ready. I don't want you to be caught off guard, like nobody told me it was going to be like this. I want you to know the life that I have now and the happiness I have has been worth it all. It has been worth every single price that I have had to pay. I would not make a single choice that was different because it has all been worth it. What do you think about this episode? Let me know. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment. If you look in the description, there is a link where you can actually leave me a voicemail. You can also DM me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm Picky Girl Travels pretty much on everything. If there is a topic that you would like me to talk about here on the podcast, let me know. As always, I want to thank you for your continued support, your kind words. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you happen to be listening or watching it on. If you're on YouTube, you can subscribe there. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, you can subscribe there, or any of the other podcatchers. If you would like to show your support, you can leave a review of the podcast. You can share this in any episode with other women who you think it might be helpful to them. If you'd like to support in a financial way, you can use the link in the description to become a patron or to buy me a hot chocolate. Until next time.